Hello and welcome to another HistorySpeak.com podcast. My name is Randy Jaye and I am your host for this podcast. This is one of a series of podcasts that are exploring Villainy Among Us. This particular podcast is episode number 10 and it features Catherine the Great, who was born in 1729 and died in 1796. She was a Russian Empress who ruled Russia for 34 years from 1762 until her death in 1796. She was an authoritarian who held power by political ruthlessness, oppressed most of her subjects, and is suspected of conspiring in the assassinations of several of her opponents, including her own husband. Catherine II, whose birth name was Sophie Friederike Ostigi von Anhalt-Zerbst. She was born on May 2, 1729, in Stettin, then part of Prussia, now Poland. She was the daughter of a minor German prince. In 1745, she was received into the Russian Orthodox Church, changed her name to Catherine, and then married Grand Duke Peter, the grandson of Peter the Great and direct heir to the Russian throne. Catherine II and Grand Duke Peter had an unhappy marriage, but they did have one son named Paul, who became Paul I, Emperor of Russia, after Catherine the Great's death. He ruled from 1796 until he was assassinated in 1801. In 1762, Grand Duke Peter became Tsar Peter III. However, he was quickly overthrown after reigning over 6 months in a coup in which Catherine is suspected of organizing. Catherine was swiftly declared the Empress of Russia. 8 days later, Tsar Peter III died mysteriously at the age of 34, likely from assassination, as many historians claim. The Russian government announced he died of natural causes from severe hemorrhoidal colic. Catherine II entertained a series of lovers whom she appointed to high governmental positions regardless of their competency. 4 of the most notable are Alexander Vasychivkov, who was a Russian nobleman of ancient lineage who served as a favorite of Catherine the Great; Grigory Orlov, who was an artillery officer who staged the 1762 military coup, resulting in her becoming empress, and was her official favorite for over a decade; Grigory Potemkin, who was a military leader, nobleman, statesman, and trusted political partner, co-ruler, and the architect of her southern expansion; Prince Platon Alexandrov Zubkov, who was the last of her favorites and the most powerful man in the Russian Empire during the last years of Catherine the Great's reign. Catherine II earned the title the Great for spearheading the Russian Empire's rapid southwards and westwards territorial expansion by continuing the process of westernization that was begun by Peter the Great. She won wars against the Ottoman Empire, which gained Russian access to the Black Sea. Territories added during her reign included Crimea, Belarus, and Lithuania. Agreements with Austria and Prussia led to 3 partitions of Poland, which extended Russia's borders well into Central Europe. During her reign, the Russian Empire was vastly expanded, approximately 200,000 square miles. She also modernized governmental administration, endorsed Enlightenment ideology, reformed education, and reorganized the legal code. She was responsible for elevating Russia into a dominant European cultural powerhouse. Catherine the Great started her reign as a political and social reformer, and one of her main interests were in education and culture. She read widely and corresponded with many of the prominent thinkers of her time, but gradually grew more conservative and authoritarian as she aged. She severely violated civil rights through the brutal enslavement of peasants, who could be bought, sold, and punished by their owners with physical abuse and be sentenced to hard labor in Siberia by their owners. She ordered the forced displacement of minorities and the censorship and jailing of political critics in an attempt to squelch ideas of revolt. She expanded serfdom, which was a socio-economic system of forced agricultural labor common in medieval Europe, in which peasants, also called serfs, were legally bound to work a lord's land, confined Jewish populations to specific regions, and violently punished political dissent to maintain her autocratic power structure. The Pugachev Rebellion was a massive peasant uprising that started in 1773 and lasted into 1774. Yemelyan Pugachev, the leader of the Eyak Cossacks, led a massive revolt of starving peasants and indigenous groups against Russian noble landlords who Catherine the Great supported and empowered. Catherine the Great then ordered the Russian army to stop the rebellion with brutal and deadly force. Tens of thousands of rebelling peasants were killed. In 1775, Pugachev was publicly quartered, where he was dragged, disemboweled alive, decapitated, and chopped into several pieces in Moscow. Despite her embrace of Enlightenment ideology, Catherine the Great's rule was ultimately brutal and autocratic. She suppressed dissent and maintained a tight grip on power, severely limiting political and social freedoms for her subjects. She was known to be merciless when dealing with any perceived threat of her authority. Although there is no proof of her involvement in assassinations, several of her political opponents died under suspicious circumstances. She conquered territories and squelched peasant rebellions where tens of thousands of people died. Under her rule, peasants were nothing more than slaves that lived under abysmal conditions. Many have wondered if anyone, including her own family and subjects, felt any grief over the death of Catherine the Great.